Um, it's lovely to see you, and we're privileged to have you here. Um, Jean-Marie, you are, I think, one of, if not the foremost theoretician within the Gestalt field. And since the publication, or maybe even predating the publication, but where I first came across you was your book that's translated into English as On the Occasion of the Other, and the idea that in my understanding that puts forward that is incredibly novel is that we do therapy on the situation, we don't do therapy on individuals. Jean-Marie has held prestigious positions within the Gestalt world within his native France and also within Europe, having been a past chair of the EAGT. So Jean-Marie, a warm welcome from us all, and I really look forward to hearing what you have to say today on the subject of migration. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. You tell me when I could start, because with system of translation, I don't know.
You can come in.
Start if you want.
Okay. Ok, so, donc, ah non, il faut que je parle français.
Yes, I will speak French. Today, our world is experiencing a crisis.
Aussi. Percy Goodman insistait beaucoup quand il nous
And since
parlait.
I am a part of this world, I am of this world, I am also in a state of crisis, consequently. And very often, when we talk about field, specialists say that we are off the field. It's not that we are in the field, we are off the field. We are a part thereof. So if I am part of that field, of that world, and the world is experiencing a crisis, well, consequently, I experience this crisis. It's a systemic crisis. We have natural disasters, epidemics, diseases, an international crisis, wars are being fought, there are economic problems which are raging, problems between various nations, and there are also totalitarian systems which are growing stronger in various countries, and all this tells us that we are dealing with genuine crises. However, from my point of view, actually being in crisis means feeling anger. I feel angry because I am unable to counteract this. I feel anger because I suffer. I suffer as a result of violence, as a result of oppression of people, and we are not the only individuals who suffer. Also, we have a sense of sadness, losing our loved ones. We lose our relationships and friends, but very often this loss results from some sort of stupidity, of some destructive behavior, of some unnecessary behavior. However, I also feel a sense of shame because I feel hate. I feel hate. Hate towards certain individuals. I am ashamed of this. I am ashamed of being passive, of being helpless, but I also feel envy. I feel envious of those who are able to transcend all this, but I also feel desperation when I realize that my world, my generation, is actually leaving this kind of world to our children, and I'm filled with all sorts of emotions, and it would have seemed that these emotions were noble, but on the other hand, I am also filled with emotions I am ashamed of. And it is hard for me to express these emotions and to confess them to myself and to all of you. Nevertheless, as a psychotherapist, I am aware of all this. I started my practice as a psychotherapist in 1967. James Hill a very well-known psychoanalyst, in the Jungian vein. He published a book with a provocative title, but also one that's very poignant. And the title is "We had 100 years of psychotherapy, and the world is doing worse and worse." Yes, we've had 100 years of psychotherapy. This is the title of the book, and the world's getting worse. That's the original title. The world feels worse and worse, exactly. So we could actually reflect on how psychotherapy developed in France and in other countries, training, conferences, and we would always choose some topics for the conferences. For example, what's the impact of a Gestalt on the society at this day and age? And obviously, there was a sort of naivete in this conference title, or even a sense of grandeur of Gestalt. And not even 40 years have passed, and we keep discussing the same things, even though the problems, the issues we're discussing today are more tangible, are more realistic. So today's topic is more like a drop in the ocean. It's a beautiful metaphor, a drop in the ocean.
Pour évoquer que lorsqu'une situation est à la limite de
It really recalls a well-known metaphor in French, which should be similar in other languages, actually, this drop in the ocean. So we have this situation which is on the verge of being insufferable, and we're not far from a revolution. We're not far from an abrupt change. So this drop can actually make the cup overflow, and it would be better if Gestalt therapy were this precisely this drop of water capable of making this cup overflow, of going over the brim.
qui est surtout connu pour un principe essentiel.
Epictetus, he was a Stoic philosopher, ancient Greece, and he was famous for a certain principle, actually being able to distinguish what depends on us and what doesn't depend on us. And of course, some things do depend on me, are up to me. I am a citizen, I am a member of various associations, I am a member of a family, I have friends, I have various circles in which I function, but something also depends on me as a Gestalt therapist, and this is also something I wanted to talk to you about.
L'évolution de la Gestalt thérapie au cours de ces dernières années.
Evolution of Gestalt therapy over the last years this evolution has led to myself and many of us no longer positioning ourselves vis-à-vis the individual as a center of the world, because earlier therapists would be guided by this principle that we would actually take on responsibility for what was going on around us, but we would forget about the broader environment, about who we were in this environment. But now we are moving to the field perspective, and the field perspective is becoming deeply rooted in our very practice. So we basically dedicate more time to the existence of the other in our world, in our milieu, in our environment, in this paradigm of the field. About 10 years ago, I found a very interesting concept which was developed by Kurt Levin's disciple, and this is namely the concept of
Et c'est moi qui vais y répondre.
a fortress. And
L'initiative de me situer
I have certain possibilities given to me by the environment. Not always am I the source of initiatives. Not always am I the person responsible for how I initiate contact. In other words, if if I see a chair, it's affordance. It's actually, I can afford the opportunity. I can sit on this chair, or I can stand on this chair and replace the light bulb. So it's affordance. That's the concept we're talking about.
Non, je ne perds pas pour autant l'initiative et la responsabilité.
I can use a knife to slice bread, but I can use this knife to kill someone. So I have this offer, I have this opportunity generated by my environment, but I must not lose my initiative because I decide what to do with this environment. So I like this concept of affordance because through this, we understand better the connection to our surroundings. And in this sense, one of the most important concepts which are offered to us by Gestalt therapy is what I really like is creative adaptation. And actually the adaptation is the goal of therapy in that we reconstruct, we rebuild the capacity to adapt. What is a pathology? Well, it is losing the ability to adapt creatively. And in various therapeutic sessions, we are capable of reinforcing creative adaptation. It is very important to realize better and to understand what creative adaptation is, what it involves. Why is it important? Well, in the 1940s, in the 1950s, when Gestalt therapy was developing, psychotherapists would be criticized and they were accused of, making people over-adapted, making people over-submissive. They would yield too strongly to certain circumstances. For instance, I want to sit on a chair, so I will adapt my body to the chair rather than the chair to my body. So I transform myself. I come into contact with my surroundings. I reshape my body. I adapt to the environment. And that was a source of accusations launched at psychoanalysts, but then they said, okay, we as psychotherapists, if we work to adapt the human being to this world, the world as it is, if this world is a pathological world, then what are we doing, essentially? We are adapting the individual to a world which is pathological, but at the same time, we could reflect on whether we are seeking to adapt the human being to a society that has gone crazy. Doesn't mean that the individual starts going crazy, but if someone doesn't adapt to the crazy society, they go crazy anyway. So you go crazy either way, whether you adapt to the mad society or not. So we had to add an adjective to this adaptation. Now we talk about creative adaptation. And when I adapt to a situation, I transform myself. At the same time, I should be a creative person. Transforming myself, I also transform the situation in the same act. And it is in this that we see this action. I am passive and active. I transform myself and I transform the environment.
C'est vrai que
so I adjust and
en train de vivre, je pense, quand je dis certains
so to actually develop an adaptive response and adjust to the situation in which we find ourselves. I'm thinking about those of you who are from Eastern Europe, from Eastern European countries. these people are being shelled now, some of them, and they are in a very difficult situation. But I'm also thinking about people from other countries, not only those in a state of war, people in difficult situations. And it is in this context that we find a certain topic which I believe is very interesting and very important. It's the topic of crisis. And as I said at the start, we all experience crises, and we all experience certain critical situations. But the crisis also needs to be a part of our therapeutic relationships, and we need to accept and acknowledge that we also go through crises in our relationships with our clients. However, despite this crisis, we are tender, we are sensitive, we look after the good quality of the interaction. However, we need to make sure that there is space for crises in our relationships. A crisis is not only an experiment. A crisis is a reality. It actually signals our humanity. And very often it is the case that we seek to mitigate a conflict preemptively. If we see that the crisis is swelling, then we take action to mitigate the situation, to calm things down so as to prevent aggression from erupting. Nevertheless, as a therapist, I should actually take it differently. If my client is concerned, then I also feel this concern. So I should react in some way to any manifestations of aggression, which obviously does not prevent me from empathizing, from feeling empathy. However, empathy has some risks that come of it. It might prevent me from noticing certain differences. And in terms of crisis situations, we have a lot of literature about this published over the recent years. Nevertheless, I've thought that it's worth looking at the source, at the word crisis. This word comes from ancient Greece, and so I looked it up in a Greek dictionary. I have this this Greek dictionary, ancient Greek, and I looked it up. Where does crisis come from? And it's a really interesting word from the point of view of our profession.
Action ou faculté de distinguer.
Crisis is an act or the capacity to distinguish in the first place. And secondly, crisis is action, which involves us making a choice. It is an action of choosing. Third meaning, a crisis is an action involving making a distinction. Fourthly, a crisis means decision-making. We decide. We have 4 different definitions of the word crisis. So choose, distinguish, separate, decide.
Moment dramatique.
And all this takes place in a critical moment. And this is a moment which is permeated with some drama. And these concepts show us very well some concepts of ourself, how we articulate, how we talk about this self, because we seek to distinguish what depends on me and what doesn't depend on me, what I have an influence on and what I don't have an influence on. There are certain situations, there are certain things we imagine, some things may simply result from my imagination. So we seek to choose the right meanings, we seek to make sure that we separate ourselves from something that might be toxic for myself or for the world around me. We identify, we choose, we separate, we distinguish, we decide. all this would be also ascribed to the ego function by authors who are well known to us. You know who I'm talking about. And to find a solution to a crisis, to resolve a critical situation. I'll actually make a digression here, and we will sort of leave Gestalt therapy aside for a while, and let's look at Paul Václavík. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago. In that modality, in that school, there are two types of changes. They don't have poetic names for these changes. They just call them changes of the first type and of the second type. Type 1 and type 2 changes. So type 1 changes are changes that involve us performing more and more of the same thing. So, for instance, physical growth, that this is type 1 change, and we repeat the same action. But the problem with this is that we can find a solution, we can make a decision which is problematic in itself. So we want to earn more, so we start to basically produce very far from us in some other corner of the world something that we use here because we want to earn more money. And we felt it very profoundly during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, and we still continue to be affected by the problems caused back then. But we also suffer as a result of fragmentation. Fragmentation leads to pathology. It leads to polarity. We see a polarity in our way of thinking. And we see an example here. For instance, we have a family that experiences a certain crisis, and let's take a couple, okay? We will see a system of control being developed in the couple. One of the partners starts to micromanage more and more what happens within the couple, and the person being controlled is suffocating. The person being controlled starts to have some sort of affair outside the relationship, and after some time the partner finds out about the affair, and we have a crisis, we have a threat, and even talk about divorce.
Donc, pour résoudre la crise,
but neither of the partners wants that divorce. That change, that affair that led to this whole situation was actually an attempt of breathing some fresh air, of starting something new. The person having an affair is keeping their actions away from the relation, but the situation seems to improve. But what really happens? The person cheated on, the partner will be controlling more and more the partner who cheated. So this is first order change, what Václavík calls first order change. So we do more and more of this very thing that caused the problem in the first place. And this is something that we encounter often in the psychotherapeutic process.
C'est un changement de paradigme.
So that's about first order change. Let's pass to second order change here. That's something totally different. We change the paradigm in this case. So we should, in this case, find some new foundation, find some new framework. And Gestalt has led to a change of paradigm in that Gestalt actually abandoned the model based on thinking and practicing turned inwards. In Gestalt, we focus our attention on the field paradigm, so the situational paradigm. We don't talk about the psychology of the individual, we talk about dynamic psychology between two people. So some say there's a relational model, although I don't really like the name, but anyway, we talk about second order change when the paradigm changes. And this means that we should develop some techniques of acting. We should become experts. We should understand better what goes on in the other person's mind. We should seek to develop our knowledge, to expand it. We should continue to seek to understand the other human being, but we separate ourselves from that human being at the same time. And through the change of the paradigm, when we pass to the field paradigm, this is precisely when we make an important change. And here we go back to the concept of creative adjustment in a critical situation.
Perhaps this creative adjustment could be complemented by other notions. Goodman invited us to ponder something that he refers to as faith, but it's not about religious faith in this case. Rather, he uses a different definition. Faith is about knowing, but not only at the level of becoming aware, but we understand that if I make one more step, then always there will always be ground under my feet. Faith involves knowing, but not only at the level of simple awareness, but if I make another step, then there will always be ground under my feet. Ground under my feet. Let's try to think about what this definition is about. Let's try to apply this notion of faith in our everyday lives. I'd like to tie this proposal of Goodman's to Pearl's proposal. Pearl's is also very motivating. I found this sentence in a text which has not been published for a long time, and the Pearls wrote, the notion of situation in our approach starts assuming a privileged situation. So the situation starts to control our actions, and that is what the essence of wisdom is about, provided, of course, that we don't forget about creative adjustment ourselves, although it's not that I'm passively immersed in a situation. I am at the same time the creator of that situation, but I allow that situation to create me at the same time. And the second idea, and that is something I could finish with, I use this idea as the title of one of the chapters of one of my books. So social changes start with me. I try to structure a situation when working with a client. The way I perceive the client, the way I position myself is very important, yet it cannot be a hierarchical model. It is not that I am in the role of an expert imposing my opinion and that I know what's good for you. If I proceed this way with the client, then I make actions at the social level. Why? Because I hope that through such activities, if I dare operate this way in psychotherapy, what is a psychotherapy? It's a social laboratory, and that model could be expanded and can proceed to all of our lives. But it assumes that we should be bold to use some new ways of contact, which our client might not even be aware of. But let us not idealize these situations. We should not idealize them. All psychotherapists could agree that relations cure or heal. Yes, the quality of the relationship often allows for transforming the other person, but also myself. But let us not forget that relationships is what also leads to pathologies. My pathology, your pathology, all the pathologies that we have result from relationships. So let's not idolize relationships, but rather let's try to understand that everything occurs through relations. I believe that successful therapy is a process in which a human being, a client, changes their point of reference, their modality, the way they communicate, they change their discourse, their narration. So this way we change the paradigm, and such a shift of paradigm may occur when a psychotherapist is present, because it is the psychotherapist that offers such possibilities, assuming that the psychotherapist can also change and is present in the meeting with the client. And last but not least, if we talk about creative adjustment and we invite our clients to that creative adjustment, we should also take care so that it doesn't become fixed. Even if we see that creative adjustment has some positive features, rather, we should always have some element of surprise. Surprise is the necessary condition of our evolution. So we might say that the function of therapy is that we should be prepared to be surprised. So successful psychotherapy is one which prepares us for never being prepared. And it is with these reflections that I'd like to leave you. So I think I've saved a couple minutes. Perhaps thanks to this, we will be able to talk to one another. I don't know how this conference is organized, but yeah.
Thank you. There is ample time, Jean-Marie, so thank you so much for a very thoughtful contribution. A nice balance between being a bit prepared, I imagine, but also meeting us in the moment with a level of unpreparedness. I think if people do have questions for Jean-Marie, perhaps you could raise your electronic hand, and you're then welcome to unmute and ask a question direct. Joanna, would you like to? Could you switch your camera on as well, Joanna?
Yeah, I think I did. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
You can't still see me though, can you?
It's fine.
My camera is on. Not sure why you can't see me. Should I just ask the question?
Please.
Yeah, all right. So as I was listening to this, so the creative adjustment, I think what I'm finding in my practice, so I practice in UK, but I have clients also in Poland. So I do therapy both in Polish and in English. And I have clients from Colombia, I have clients from States. So it's quite a mix of cultures. And what I have found, and I think this is the problem of the creative adjustment sometimes, is that part of the problem of human situation is that the creative adjustment then become a lock, and it's passed from generation to generation. And if you are within that generation, if you are within that culture, you don't see it. it's hard to come out of it if you are stuck in it. So it's interesting for me when I'm practicing in UK to point out certain things that are cultural, that have been passed from generation to generation. And since I've been here, I am super aware of certain things that have been passed to me from my Polish culture that I wasn't aware being in Poland, if that makes sense. So there's something that shifted for me. And I think that the creative adjustments become at some point a stuck point for us. If we, I don't know how to say it, but if we cannot see that we are stuck in it.
Yeah, absolutely, you are right. But in this case, the name that which is given by Pearls and Goodman to this phenomenon is not creative adjustment, is conservative adjustment.
At some point, it was a creative adjustment, wouldn't it be? Like
the problem of creative of this kind of adjustment that you are sorry about it is that it started as a creative adjustment. The beginning was a creative adjustment, exactly like any symptom originally was a creative adjustment. But when it become fixed, it become a kind of confluence, it become fixed, and it's no more creative adjustment. It's an adjustment, yes, but not creative. Creative means being able to catch the novelty of the situation and to do something using this novelty of the situation. There is always novelty in the situation. But if we don't notice the novelty of the situation, we just lean on our archives, on our past, on our history, on our past experience.
But that's what I'm saying. So I think the point of psychotherapy, or a problem of the psychotherapy in a way, is that sometimes we get stuck in it and we don't know we are stuck in it.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying, that we, yeah.
Exactly. But if you work as a Gestalt therapist, you know that your work also, part of your work is to reintroduce the ego functioning. If you are stuck, it means that you have the client has only one possibility to act, one direction, and our work is to reintroduce, re-offer the possibility to have 2 possibilities, 3 possibilities, 4 possibilities, and to help the client to choose which one could be the most creative and the most adjusted to the situation, the most creative. Yes.
That was it.
Okay, thank you. A good question.
Thank you, Joanna. If anybody else has a question, please raise your hands or post it in the chat. Larissa. Anatoly.
Доброго дня, Анатолій. Лариса має тренінг.
Larissa is in training. She has a group, weekend training. I'd like to offer some words on Jean-Marie's speech in the context of an adjustment or adaptation while in migration, because adaptation in migration is adaptation also in one's own culture or country, and one is very distinct from the other. And that's why we need to treat the adaptation process as a creative adjustment process. And here was problem of the adapting or bringing the culture to the host country. And this creative adjustment involves a process of acculturation to the form of the host country. And that is the point of adaptation. If we speak from the point of view of the Gestalt therapy, this needs to be a holistic process. So everything needs to be considered: the motivation, adaptation, psychological, cultural, social. And it is important to work with the mental condition of migrants. And an important moment, which I've talked about during my presentation, an expert works with an intercultural client, should not only support mentally, but should also serve as a coach or teaches a different culture, shows a different culture. He teaches the migrant how to adapt, this intercultural migrant how to adapt. He teaches him or her that, or he should teach. Because it is not enough to support the migrant mentally. You need to provide them with a roadmap. Excuse me, Anatoly, could you please change your channel? Listen to the language that you're speaking. Yes. Let me try and find the...
Jest globus? Так, już widzę, już zmieniłem.
Dzięki.
Так. І, власне, я закінчую, хотів би ще раз...
And finishing, I'd like to once again revisit my speech experts who work with intercultural migrants should also know those intercultural details. They should have the competences, the skills. They should understand how the migration process looks like and how the psyche of the migrant looks at the various stages of the process. And perhaps then quality work with migrants is possible when you have the suitable skills and qualifications. Thank you.
You're welcome to respond, Jean-Marie.
Je peux pas dire grand-chose parce que je n'ai pas vu je n'ai pas eu la première moitié de la traduction.
I don't have a lot of things that I could add here. I haven't heard the translation well at the beginning. But can you hear me? Do you hear me?
Était apparue dans le bas de mon écran, mais elle a à nouveau disparu, donc je n'avais pas vu.
And the interpretation for some reason escapes from my computer. I don't always notice when it's being done.
Parce que je crois que c'est extrêmement important. C'est extrêmement important qu'en tant que psychothérapeute.
Now, something that I very much agree with, it's very important for me that we as for me as a psychotherapist, not to try and be able to understand everything at any level of a human being using our model. After all, there are different dimensions, economic, social, political, the religious, faith, cultural, all that points to our experience. What I am very interested in is comprehensive thinking. So we understand that we should be in dialogue, but we are considering these different spheres or dimensions or planes. I do not like when someone starts using a psychological approach, but only a psychological approach, trying to understand everything that's going around. Someone tries to use a psychoanalytical approach, for example, to understanding why we have wars in the world. That is not the suitable approach to understand the reasons of war. So in order to understand the psychology, or let me put it differently, sometimes I see Gestalt psychotherapists who live comfortably in some nice little country, and suddenly they start working with migrants who have suffered the effects of war. And I feel uncertain, will this work? Because that psychotherapist does not have the suitable experience or roots to do that. Of course, they can sell well.
Жан-Мари, я знаю, что вы сейчас в поездке, и несмотря на это, вы нашли время сегодня быть с нами. Спасибо вам огромное.
I know you're traveling right now, well, but you've nonetheless found the time to join us. Your support is a source of great inspiration for us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jean-Marie. I hope that you will, I don't know how that you'll be able to stay with us for a bit longer and participate in the conference as much as you can. It'll be a